We have been going through the book of Matthew, looking at Jesus and his interactions with his disciples. What was he teaching to them? What lessons was he bringing to them? What type of correction was he bringing to them? How do these things affect them? And then how do they affect us today as his modern day disciples? We find ourselves, once again, reading from the English Standard Version, and we are reading in Matthew chapter 26, verses 30 to 35 today. It reads, "And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And then Jesus said to them, 'You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee.' Peter answered him, 'Though they all fall away, because of you, I will never fall away.' And Jesus said to him, 'Truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, 'Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you.' And all of the disciples said the same." Important text. I mean, it all is, obviously, but it's an interesting text. It confirms something that we have seen over and over throughout the Gospel of Matthew, and I've talked about it in many of these videos, is Jesus' foreknowledge of what is about to take place. Now, we as the readers, if you're familiar with the story, you know what's about to happen. Jesus is about to be arrested and crucified and rise again from dead, and then meet with the disciples and do some other stuff and then ascend into heaven. We know that. Now, Matthew doesn't cover all of that, really, but we know that. And Jesus also knew that. Time and time again throughout Matthew, he has referenced that he is going to be arrested, that he's going to be crucified, that the Son of Man must die, that this has to take place. And he's mentioned it over and over again, but it's not just with the crucifixion that he has foreknowledge. Here he also speaks to the events that are about to take place and how they are going to affect these 11 disciples of his. He says to them, "You're all going to run away." And then Peter, they all said, "No, we're not." But Peter in specific, we highlight his interaction here with Christ. And he says, they might run, but I never will. And Jesus humbles him in that moment and says to him, before the rooster crows, which is at sunrise, right? When the sun comes up and the rooster announces the new day. So before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. It's a humbling thing in response to, I will never deny you. No, you will tonight, and you'll do it 3 times. That's intense. And it happened. That's what happens. And it's hard. It's harsh. It's difficult. And sometimes we can come to God with this overconfidence in ourselves, in our commitment, or in our own righteousness, or in something like that. And we can think too highly of ourselves. And then, maybe God speaks to you through prayer, through his word, through a teaching, something like that, and he humbles you. And that's good. That's good. We should welcome that. We should allow God to humble us. And what's interesting here is that Jesus knew Peter and the other disciples were going to flee. He knew that. He knew that Peter would deny him 3 times that night. He knew that Peter, after the crucifixion, would revert back to his old career as a fisherman and just basically give up everything that had happened. And he knew all of that at supper, when he broke bread with him and said, "Do this in remembrance of me." He knew that moments before that, when he gave him projects and things to do and assignments to carry out. He knew that when he sat around the fire with him countless nights, having deep personal conversations and speaking life into him. He knew the shortcomings of all of these men, Judas included, when he said, "Follow me." And really, it's a sobering thought and point, and it's one that we need to have and understand, is that Jesus calls these men, and he calls us too, to himself, to follow him, knowing the shortcomings that we have, knowing the problems that we have, knowing the areas that we're going to fail. And so often those moments of failure, those moments of sin can feel so final. I failed you, Lord, and it just feels like there's no return from this. There's no next thing. And that's very, very understandable feeling about sin, because sin leads to death, and death itself is so final. Death is this one thing that you can't fix, you can't return, you can't bring that back. Sure, you can do CPR and wow, the machine that pulses a heart. Blanking on that one. But you can do that, right? But this is a little bit different than that. Well, not little, it's majorly different than that. But Christ here, his statement is really interesting. You will all flee, but after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. This moment of death that usually is a period, it's the end. With Christ, it's just a comma. And even previous to it taking place, it was a comma to him. It's a blip. It's happening, it's going to happen, and there's more to the story after it. I will be raised from the dead. And he was. His ministry continues. It's interesting. It's a humbling point of view. And so it's interesting to note that in our failures, Christ is still rooting for us. Christ is still there to offer his grace and his forgiveness, and desires that we would move on from those. That after we deny him, right? Sin, in one way of saying it is denying Christ's lordship over our life, where we're saying, I'm going to choose the thing that you don't want me to do instead of the thing that you want me to do. And we're denying him lordship in that way. And so all sin really is, to some degree, is denying Christ. And so even though you've denied me, I'm still here. Return to me. Come to me. Now, in history, and not just our own micro-history, but even Paul in his letters to the church, the start of church history, he had letters where people took this principle and they took it as a hall pass to sin. Well, if Jesus died for my sins, I may as well commit some. No, that's not what we're talking about here. But it's this understanding of the grace of God. You're all going to fall. You're all going to scatter. I'll meet you in Galilee. I'll meet you over here. You're going to fall short. I'll meet you over here. You're going to fail me. I'll meet you over here. Come to me in repentance. Come to me that we might restore you and move on from this. It's a great truth. It's a wonderful truth. And hopefully we can understand that even in our shortcomings, Christ has made a way. It's a beautiful truth. I hope that's an encouragement to you today. I really do hope that you honor God in all that you do.